Dear designers, dear ladies and gentlemen, hello. It's a pleasure and honor to stand here today in these challenging times and to welcome you to our artist talk evening in the All Goods exhibition in Grund. My name is Laureline van de Heuvel. I work at the embassy, the Dutch embassy in Berlin. And that we see this exhibition today has its origins in the just concluded state visit by the Dutch royal couple. His Majesty King Willem-Alexander and Her Majesty the Queen Maxima. They were here. And during their 3-day visit to Berlin, there was a lot of culture included in their program. On the first day, they visited the Anne Frank Center, which is the first inclusive museum in Europe. Very impressive. On the third day, the King and the Queen had a preview in the Berlin Global exhibition, conceived by Paul Spies, chief curator of the Federal State of Berlin at the Humboldt Forum. And the exhibition will open to the public on July 20th. But most important, on the second day, the King and the Queen visited Gropiusbau, where they met Hella Jongerius, which we proudly see as the leading lady of design in the Netherlands, who is now honored with a comprehensive exhibition called Woven Cosmos, that you can see until August 15th. And also there, in Gropiusbau, was a presentation of 6 representatives of the All Goods program that you can also see here in the exhibition and of whom we also will hear tonight. And this All Goods program, I want to tell you a little bit more about this. It was initiated by my colleagues Valerie Ann Huppermans, who will be here shortly, and Gijs Koenigs, over there, which focuses on new materials in architecture, design and fashion for a future circular economy. How came this program into being? In the wake of the climate emergency, we need to reduce the impact of everyday urban life on resources from the scale of the individual to an international approach. Both in the Netherlands and Germany, there is increasing political and public attention to this transition to a circular economy. The power of creative industries, of design, fashion and architecture, is their capacity to present visions of the future, to radically imagine new realities. New materials try to alter the way we think about resources by amazing us with their variety of options, of which we soon will hear 4 fascinating examples. These revolutionary insights are what we need in a rapidly changing world, faced with unexpected threats and challenges. As the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Berlin, we made it our mission to bring together both German and Dutch creative minds, to stimulate exchange between Dutch and German architects and designers in order to come up with answers to social questions. It is in the exchange and synergy that we can truly reach greater heights. Tonight, we have the chance to get to know up close 4 of the 6 projects that were presented to the King and the Queen in Gropiusbau. We will hear from design duo Ida Rapp and Natasha Unger, who transformed basalt stone into a fiber with which they created modular elements that are so strong that you can sit on them. You can see them on the left and over here. We will hear from Kirsten Hermans, who designed an adaptive sun shading system for facades to regulate internal temperature and save energy. We will hear from Basse Stitgen, who turned discarded blood from slaughterhouses into solid objects. And last but not least, Tim van der Loo, who will show us how he used waste as a resource and makes what he calls regenerative jeans. Very interesting. And maybe they even will share a little anecdote with us how it was presenting their projects in Gropiusbau for the King and the Queen. I would be interested to hear. Before we continue with our first artist talk, I want to warmly thank, first of all the designers involved for all your time and energy. It was really nice, thank you. Of course, the Groens team. The exhibition came into being in a very short amount of time, and thanks to the great work of James Verheul in the back, and Sebastian Guzman over there, yeah, and Nina Bloemen, over there. We are here today, and we can see this great exhibition. Until Sunday, tell your friends. So, thank you for your attention, and I will now give the stage to Ida and Natasha.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening. In our presentation today, we're going to talk a little bit about how we design and how what kind of previous work we have done, but also go into more in detail about the project that we are exhibiting here today, which is Stone Web. And if there are any questions, feel free to maybe interrupt us or ask once we are done. We're really into hearing what you want to know about. And yeah, so we are Natasha and Ida, and we are Berlin-based textile and surface designers, and we come from the Weißensee Academy of Art, where we both also studied textile and surface design. And we started our creative partnership pretty early on in our education, and after graduating, we decided to start our experimental design studio Rap Unga together, where we make anything from everyday objects to more unconventional installation type pieces. And all of our products or objects have a very strong focus on materiality and material use. And I hope this will go over smoothly with the microphone because we will be switching around a bit, but yeah, here.
Okay, so to tell you a little bit more about our work in general. So when it comes to our work, we have a very experimental approach to design. So for example, we like to experiment with new materials or work with well-known materials and highlighting maybe a new aspect in them. So this could be that we give a material a new look or function or even a whole new application. And this approach is also reflected by us in trying to find a balance between function and aesthetic when we create pieces. And one of our main goals is in general to create works that can be experienced interactively and also are accessible to all, but still challenge the viewer on many levels. So here we will show you some examples of our previous work, and so you get a better understanding maybe of what we do. And this project is called Blow Up. So we worked with Space Blanket. You might know, this material. So we created a blown up room just out of this foil. It was a temporary place where people could come in and experience the material from inside. And maybe what was interesting was that the material by itself can change from transparent to opaque because of the light situation. So during the day, you can see this here, from the sun is shining on the object, so you couldn't see from the outside into the room, but then from inside you could see everything that was going on outside. And then here it's the switched situation, so there's no light outside anymore, but we have light inside, and so everything was completely opaque and golden inside, and now you could see everything going on inside the room. So in this project we actually made like hundreds of ceramic bowls for a meal in the Culinary Arts Gallery Zagreus in Berlin. And the most important thing about the project, or the idea, was that the guests had to communicate and interact with each other to find out how to actually eat their meal, because we didn't give them any explanation or additional tools.
Yeah. This is one of our projects, Abstract Textiles, and although we come both from a textile background and are trained textile designers, we have rarely made any like textile typical products, such as like fabrics. So we really want to do that outside of university. And in this project, we just manipulated known materials to make or give them a new appearance. So like, again, like the space blankets. And here we just did like some bigger weaving pieces, and they're really structured and can like be shaped into certain objects. And right now they're being used as costumes in a piece. And the same we did with latex. So we also cut them and dyed them and made it look kind of like a human fleshy type skin. And this was another recent project of ours where it also is about like interacting with the object, and it's mirrors and acrylic glass, and you have to walk around this installation, and then from one perspective you see yourself mirrored in all the surfaces, and from the other you can't see yourself at all. And I think all of our projects are primarily linked on a conceptual level more so than on an aesthetic one. And the like recurring themes in our projects are like accentuating and linking of material and space, but also creating like interactive experiences for our viewers and challenging their perception. Yeah, and here at Grund, we are showing an example of this in our master project, Stone Web. And Stone Web is a system in which individual models can be combined to create larger semi-transparent spatial objects. And here the heavy and massive material stone is transformed into a like mesh-like construction and becomes very like lightweight. And depending on the viewer, the project can be seen as either like an art object or a more functional project. And when talking to people from like technical backgrounds, they always find it really like fascinating what you can do with materials. But for us, it was more of like a material study to find out what one can do with basalt fiber. And yeah, to give you more info about our material we used, basalt is a stone, and it's formed by the cooling of lava, and it's the most common rock on the Earth's crust, and in an industrial process it can be melted and made into a fiber. Just to show you the process maybe, the pure stones are fed into a furnace, and this happens without any chemical additives. And then, it's molten, or it melts at 1,400 degrees, and then is extruded through like really tiny nozzles. So you have like hundreds of threads coming down there, and then it's gathered to form a continuous fiber, which is the actual basalt fiber that we use in our work. Basalt fiber is a quite technical product, and has many characteristics of both carbon fiber, what you might know, and also fiberglass. But it has it has the same advantages and mechanical properties, but also because it's a natural material, it is more eco-friendly. It's also non-toxic and green, and by the production, it is actually more energy efficient than carbon and glass fiber is made. In general, coming from the technical background, it is used in the building sector for rebars in concrete, or also in the automotive industry, because it has really excellent mechanical, thermal, and chemical properties. Now we wanted to see how we can use it as a technical fiber, but transforming it in a design or art way.
Ja, soll ich die geben, oder?
Yeah, in general, when it comes to like our design process, the first thing that we always focus on is the material, even without having like a final product in mind or an object in mind, and we analyze it and using according to its like advantageous properties, meaning that we always design with, or we try to design with a great consideration for the material itself and the material we choose. And so in the beginning of this project, we did just that. We looked at the material, we tried to figure out what one could do with it, what has not been done with it, and yeah. So early on, we recognized that the material has a potential of being like very stable, but also by like only using very minimum amount of material. And we decided to explore this direction further. And yeah, we put a lot of effort into researching like and testing various textile production methods, like shapes, forms, and how we could code it, and how the combination of that would work in like a larger structure. Yeah, so we tried different wrapping techniques and different forms, and there were like very bigger challenges that we did not expect with like a natural fiber. And when it came to like the textile production method, we decided to use like this chaotic wrapping technique, which you can also see when you look at the structure. And it was very suitable for the forming of continuous shapes while being very material saving. And in addition, like the crisscross pattern stabilizes the surface and also distributes like the weight evenly when it's load bearing.
So yeah, finding a shape was more difficult than we expected because there were a lot of requirements that we had to fulfill on the technical side, but also on the aesthetic side, of course. And that was, for example, that the fiber break in certain angles, so the form needed to be a bit more rounded. Then also just to make the load bearing efficient, the sides couldn't be too long for the fiber. And also the problem, or it's not a problem, but it's a fact that we cannot wrap inside the form, so the form also needed to be like just one body. So for the actual shape, we chose an octahedron, which we selected for the constructive and also aesthetic features it offers. So it has a very certain geometry that offers a special stability, and also it's maybe coming from the nature, like in honeycomb structures, where this kind of shapes help to stabilize a bigger structure. So despite its strict geometric shape, the octahedron can be combined to diverse orientations and form really organic, bigger structures. To
produce the models, the way we did it is we had to build like these wood forms, which you can see on the left, and they look really like torture devices, but they're not. And we would coat the fiber and wrap them around the frames. And once the fiber had dried, we could like unscrew the forms, and then there's some holes in the forms where you can take the frames out of, and then we would build them back together and do the process again. Yeah.
Sorry, you said dry. As you were wrapping it, what consistency does the fiber have? Is it hot, cold, wet?
No, the fiber is dry. We can show you a sample of it later, but we coat it with a biopolymer to get it into the form. So it is coated with like this thin layer of biopolymer. And and depending on like the amount of fiber and the thickness of it, we could make different like surfaces and stabilities within the models. Yeah, in our design, the material combination, the textile production method, but also the pattern and form make it possible to achieve like structural stability with minimal material. So we needed the combination, like the right combination of all those three things to make them very light but also stable. And
And so maybe also a bit technical part, but we also had to validate our construction. So we thought it would be nice to do like real load tests. And so we had the chance to do that at the Institute for Structural Engineering at the TU Berlin. And there we found out that the modules exhibited great load-bearing properties. So in the beginning, we just went there and we thought, okay, maybe they will or can hold about like maybe 100 kilos. And then, yeah, you can see it on the left. So we began to stack the weight on it, but then it got so high and we crossed the 200 kilo line. So we were actually allowed, because this was way too dangerous, to go to a professional testing machine. So this is the one on the right. And so what the machine is doing, it can detect the point at which a material loses its structural integrity. And so this module that you can see there actually weighs 950 grams, but it can carry up to 750 kilos when it is evenly loaded. So because this is really a lot of load, these results gave us a perspective of what our project could be beyond an experimental material study. So in a more functional context, this modular system can be used for small-scale applications like furnishing, or combined to create large-scale spatial structures, room dividers, or urban furniture. And due to its scalability and production optimization, we also see a potential in landscape design or even architecture, where it could be something like a green facade, or in the next step, when we would have robotics to really optimize it, it could be used as a lightweight building structure. So for us, it was important that the technical as well as aesthetic dimension of the project really blend together. So on an aesthetic and visual level, we wanted the modules to be combined in such a way that they get lighter the higher up they are, so that the structure itself has a very lightweight appearance, in contrast to the solid form of stone. And because of the structure's modularity, we try to adapt this always to its surroundings, so no two setups ever look the same. And how you can see here also is that we always want the structure to have a really diffuse appearance, so that the chaotic wrapping is reflected in the structure.
Yeah, to grasp the system's appeal, the observer's movement is key, because when moving around the structure, like, one can perceive and see different visual gradings, from very transparent to more opaque, and from very geometrical to more diffuse. Yeah, and when it comes to to sustainability, we as designers obviously always are increasingly aware of how the products we design have an impact on our planet. So in our project, it was really important for us to use a natural material that is recyclable even when it's coated, and also it's able to be reused and cut into short fibers. And the production method and the entire way of producing it is really resource conserving, and so material saving. Yeah, and in general, I think we both think textile construction techniques like the one we used in our project are suitable for lightweight construction. And the focus is more on structured surfaces rather than on the massive building techniques. And we see great potential in such building techniques, like these kind of more structured and textile approaches. And if we would further develop our system, we would really want it to be, aside from changing maybe the form, we would also really want it to be multifunctional in addition to modular, so that potential users can react flexibly and economically to changing requirements in their surroundings. And also from our perspective, we think that besides the use of sensible materials and new material combinations, it is especially important to help shape the way people interact with the objects we create. And yeah, I think that's for now all from us, but we hope this gave you a little bit more insight into our project. And yeah, if you have any more questions, please ask or come up to us after. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Kirsten Hermans. I'm presenting the moving light system tonight. It's standing in the back there of the exhibit. I can show it to you in process later on. Today, in the presentation, I was thinking I'm going to present the project, first of all, what it does. I'm going to give you some technical information on it. But also, I thought maybe it's interesting to include the journey there, how I got to the idea, the personal motivation, and the bigger picture, why it makes sense to have it, some inspiration, and then the outlook of the project, what I'm going to do next. What it is, it's an adaptive shading system, which is actually not something that I invented. It's been around for a long time. I think the first one has been designed in 1930, which is something that I'm going to show you later on, the first adaptive shading system. It's a quite well-researched solution to reduce the carbon footprint of the built environment by minimizing energy demands for heating and cooling. This is some illustrations on how that works. An adaptive system closes the facade in order to prevent overheating in sunny conditions, and then it opens up again to prevent undercooling in cloudy or cold conditions. So because this uses much less energy for heating and cooling, it reduces a building's CO2 emissions quite significantly and can help make its operation carbon neutral. My project is called Moving Light. I developed this in the master program at Weißensee Kunsthochschule in Berlin. And I have since developed it a little further. Now I'm in the process of turning it into an actual product, and that will be the next phase. You can see here the prototype in movement. So the kinetic surface is able to react to external climate conditions. It actually has integrated sensors that measure light levels and opens and closes according to the light levels measured. The entire surface is programmable through a technique that is based on the principle of weaving. So all these identical elements that you can see here can be made in various materials, but they can also be arranged in various configurations. The surface can be programmed to create several movement patterns, like opening and closing, to perform climate regulating functions. It can adjust to form a perfect angle. Is it moving? No, right? Maybe it's moving so slow that you can't see it. No. Okay, so yeah, because actually the idea is that it moves with the path of the sun and adjusts the angle towards to the way the sun moves over a building. It's also, you can see that it includes solar cells to make the operation of this prototype energy self-sufficient. Sorry, I'm thrown off by why it's not moving, but the next one's going to move. Yeah, no. Okay, sorry. Okay, so in the design approach, I try to preserve the sensory and atmospheric aspect of natural light as a biophilic design element. And that was important to me because I'm sorry, this way. So so actually it can also produce choreographed light and shadow. And this is important to me because I wanted to include light as a biophilic design element. So it's a reconnection to the natural environment that is imitating simple light moments. In terms of the way it technically works, the moving light system uses one simple element that can be easily produced with a subtractive manufacturing technology like laser cutting and CNC milling. And each element is assembled with a simple plugging system so that each material is kept in its homogeneous form, so including all electrical parts and wiring. So they can all be taken apart again in the end-of-life phase, can be dismantled, and all materials can be returned into their respective material cycles, making it a circular product. So that's on top of it having a carbon-neutral effect on architecture. The best way to install it is, in order to get the best shading effect, is to install it on the outside of the facade, if that's technically possible. But ideally it should be installed within a double-skin facade to protect it from weathering. In order to retrofit existing buildings, it can be installed on the inside of the interior. And there's quite a lot of buildings that need to be retrofit because there's a lot of buildings that are not carbon neutral yet. In terms of background, I thought it's nice to explain a little bit of how I got there and my personal motivation. And this starts with me growing up in East Frisia in Germany. It's in the northwestern part of the country. It has a lot of clouds and really bad weather. But there's very rarely any sun, and that is because it's hidden by these wandering clouds, which make for a really good light filter. I then moved to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, which has kind of the same conditions, except the clouds are even moving quicker, and but it's interesting because also the light that gets created by these clouds is a quite specific kind of poetic, nice light that has been picked up by the Dutch painters of the 17th century as well. I've also included the average temperature here in August, 21.6 Celsius. In Dallas, Texas, where I've spent some time, that was quite shocking because the average temperature there is 35.6 Celsius. And what's interesting about this city is that it actually only exists because of the possibilities of air conditioning, because all the buildings that you see are air conditioning from the inside, and they were built in the 60s after the oil boom in Texas. Another good example of an oil boom country is the United Arab Emirates, where you also see every single building that you see is air conditioned, and the average high temperature in August is 39.1 Celsius, which is extremely hot, and you can't really in August walk over the street without literally frying. So similar situation in New York City, which also has recently had this building boom with super large scale buildings. So all of these cities have in common that it's quite a high temperature outside and a lot of artificial cold air inside, which means a lot of air conditioning. And this is why about 40% of all global carbon emissions are caused by buildings. It started all with this building. It's a labor house by SOM in New York City. Kind of a sensation because it was the first building that had an entire glass curtain wall facade and a mechanical cooling system. So what was special about it is that you could have a really well-tempered inside situation. You could have great views to the outside. And this was all made possible by mechanical cooling. So this is why buildings and construction both are responsible for almost 40% of global carbon emissions, and the operational emissions account for almost 28%. So architecture must drastically change. It must quite drastically change to meet the requirements of the Paris Climate Agreement and the European Green Deal, which actually includes the better energy efficiency of buildings. And there's the new net zero carbon buildings commitment, in which company, organizations, and cities worldwide already try to design and construct climate neutral buildings from 2030 onwards and retrofit existing architecture by 2050. So how do we do this? And here I wanted to show some old examples, actually. This is the first adaptive facade, kind of, if you can call it that, by Oscar Niemeyer in Brazil, which is interesting because that was a really hot climate, and it's an example from tropical modernism in which these louvers were installed. It's like the beginning of the Brise Soleil, and they were installed to kind of like keep a really nice view to the outside, because what you see on the opposite is quite beautiful view, but to manually adjust them to go with the path of the sun. This is interesting because it's the same year that the Lever House in New York City was built. It's another building in Rio by M.M. Roberto, and it's a shading system that can be manipulated by the user in the building itself. Some inspiration and how I got there is a book by David Leatherborough and Richard Wesley, The Performance and Style in the Work of Olge and Olge. And what they are stating is that shading devices are actually expressive because they invite a rich play of light and shadow, and they add rhythm, light, color, and texture to a building. And the shadows that these elements produce create physical comfort and a play of light and dark. And this is all kind of to show that to include an adaptive shading system or any shading system can actually enhance the aesthetics and the feeling, the comfort of a building. Because we really need to do that in order to change architecture. This is another example of Olge and Olge's work. They've actually they're kind of like pioneers in climate neutral architecture, if you will, because in 1957 they came up with this catalog that has categories of how to design shading devices depending on the angle of the sun that the building is facing and the local light conditions. And they have made very specific instructions of how to do that, and patterns, which was really inspiring, I thought. This is another example of their work where they advised Lucio Costa on another building in Rio. The second inspiration I would like to show is of Hassan Faiti, a book about natural energy and vernacular architecture in hot, arid climates. And these are really interesting examples of the 1648 in Cairo. It's the Mashrabiyah system, like a really old shading system. And what's really interesting about this is that it's very specific design. The pattern on the top is looser than the pattern on the bottom, making it create more airflow on the top, less airflow on the bottom. And it's also, depending on which angle the building faces, there's different patterns that are constructed with this technique. And I thought that was quite interesting to further my personal project, the moving light system. As a continuation of the project, I'm working with parametric design tools to create actual patterns for specific light conditions and buildings. So I look at local light conditions because you can, calculate all of this in advance with the proper software and design patterns and movements accordingly. So that actually the system only closes where it really needs to close. So if the sun goes over the building in the course of the day, that's how the system can close. And I figured I can do that with the prototypes I have. This is moving, okay. So this is some tryouts. I made experiments with angles and adaptive movement calculated in rhino with grasshopper, and trying to figure out different patterns and also different movement scenarios. And with that, trying to maintain a view to the outside for the viewer, but also define parameters to perhaps try to find a few more programmed light moments to enhance the user well-being on the inside of a building. Yeah, that's it.
And I will talk today about the work that I did in the last years with blood. And I think when you think about blood, it makes a really big difference actually if it's inside the body or if it's outside of the body. And it's really hard also for me to still wrap my head around some of the meanings that are embedded within it. And well, blood outside of the body, except maybe when it's in a medical context, it's in an abstract way, maybe matter out of place. And for me, this really helped, seeing it like this really helped to contextualize the work that I will show you later also, that I did with the blood. And I think actually this kind of matter out of place works with a lot of things actually that we also have in this exhibition here. I think when I look at the sulfur in this kind of shape also, it's a little bit matter out of place. And I think it's really interesting actually to perceive things like this. And this sentence actually, well, I only took a part of it, but actually it is from Mary Douglas, who's an anthropologist. And she basically, in her book, Purity and Danger, which I can recommend to everyone, it's really super interesting, she coined the phrase that dirt is just matter out of place. So basically anything that we conceive as something that is dirty or that is waste, you can just put it in a different context, and through that actually you change the status of the matter. It's also very simple with the example, just like hair is really nice when you have it on the head, but you don't really want to have it in your food or in the drain. So it's really where you find things that really influence how you see them. And I think it's really interesting in general also when you talk about bioart and biodesign, it is really nice to actually challenge some of those like preconceived notions that we have about where we expect certain things, because we also, I think, have this idea where we want to expect natural matter, and we have those kind of like, we think in systems and we expect it to find it in certain spots. And then when we see it somewhere else, that's maybe then even like a little bit repulsive. So, well, for me, like a little bit like as a starting point, this is somehow was really helpful for me to frame my work. And well, coming back to the blood, actually there's also such a big difference if we talk about human blood or animal blood. So for humans we have like all this metaphorical meaning embedded in it, that you can also become a blood brother with someone when you cut your hand. When you're good at something, you have it in your blood. When you're afraid, your blood runs cold, but we don't really know what happens with the animal blood. And I think this is largely due because to the invisibility of the livestock farming industry in general, but also specifically in the slaughter industry, I think. So just to show you some numbers, this is from 2011, but it's pretty much stays the same, although it's over 60 billion chickens by now. It's 1.4 billion pigs and around 300 million cows that get slaughtered annually for human consumption. I also put specifically the liters of cow blood onto this because this is the material that I'm working with. And it's also very important to differentiate between different kinds of animal blood. For example, pig blood gets used for really, really many things. I mean, I guess we all know it kind of like a blood sausage, but then there's also some tobacco companies that put it into the filter of the cigarette because it works as an artificial lung and then it's not as poisonous to smoke. So it's really bizarre, I think. And the story with cow blood is that it is actually often a waste because the regulations around doing something with it are very strict, because what happened is basically that using the protein that was contained in the cow blood, which is also the protein that I use to make the objects that I will show you later, actually feeding those proteins back to the cows caused mad cow disease because there were also like small particles of a brain from the animal in the blood. And then, well, I guess we all know what happened when BSE happened. And then I think also I show this number because somehow I come from a product design background, so I thought, if I can make a material out of this, I can solve a waste problem. But I think then after looking at it for a while, I feel like this number is of course problematic, but it's not the source of the problem. This is really the problem, that there's 300 million cows slaughtered every year and somehow we don't see any of it. It's completely invisible. So this is what I want to address with my project, Blood Related, by the way, is the name of it. Here you can see a floor plan of an industrialized slaughterhouse, one that kills a cow every 12 seconds. It's in the US, and well, the thing about this floor plan is that it's actually not like readily available somewhere online, because even that, just like a floor plan, that's something that's very, very hard to find because this industry is so closed off. So this floor plan is actually drawn from the memory of a political scientist who worked undercover in a slaughterhouse for 6 months. The book is called Every 12 Seconds. And it's really also showing this invisibility and this distance of this industry. And this is part of a film that I've been working on that you can also later watch over there. And basically in this film, it traces the process of how blood becomes a byproduct and a waste product on the hand of all the architecture, the tools and the machines and processes involved in it. So what you see is then the hook and the cutting glove for the protection of the slaughterman. And the thing is that, well, for those we used 3D scans. I did this project together with Juan Arturo Garcia, who's a filmmaker that's based in Mexico and Amsterdam. His work is really amazing, so you should also check this out. And then for the larger tools that we did not get access to, because I've been basically working on this project since 2017, and I've been not continuously, but very often trying to get access to a large-scale slaughterhouse, and it didn't happen yet, because I was always honest with my intention of saying that I would like to maybe document the tools, and then the moment you mention a camera. That's usually when you don't get a reply anymore. And but I did actually go to a small-scale slaughterhouse, and this is also where I get the blood from, the cow blood that they would usually. What usually would happen with it is that it gets dry, that it gets picked up, and then it gets dried, and then it gets burned. So that is what happens with the cow blood of small slaughterhouses. And then this is more like from the larger facilities, and because we didn't get access to it, we used product catalogs to recreate the images. Yes?
Sorry to interrupt you, but when does the slaughterhouse become a bigger organization? Like, what approximate number would you say of
I think that's
cows per day, or like?
yeah. So I mean, like to give you like two very strong extremes. You have the slaughterhouse where I get the blood from. They kill cows only on a Friday, and then up to 20 animals, and that's a lot. And then what I mentioned earlier, a big industrialized slaughterhouse in the US kills one every 12 seconds, 7 days a week. And then, I mean, also the scale of the operations is really, it's just very hard to grasp, I think. And then throughout this film, we also wanted to amplify this distance that we used, images out of product catalogs, and there the language that is used, you might as well be buying a vacuum cleaner. You only have like those like bullet points, like those are the top attributes of it, and then we used also exactly those to create this film. And then, in the end, you see what is made from the cow blood. Mostly, actually, when it gets used, it is used as fertilizer. Because of its nitrogen content, it's actually one of the best natural fertilizers that you could have. Of course, you don't want to have too much nitrogen, but yeah, that's what you can also buy in some gardening shops. It's called blood meal, and you can use it also to feed your fish, I think. And here is then the process that I do with the blood. So I basically developed this bioplastic that is made 100% out of blood, and it's done by dehydrating it in this drying oven, and then you get those kind of granules. Then it's powdered up, and then I use some metal molds, and this dehydration process takes place with a very low temperature, 60 degrees, and through that actually the proteins don't really break down, and then you can use, when you heat it up and you pressurize it, the albumin protein that's contained in the blood basically binds all the solid parts together. So the objects also that you see over there, and also that, like, this is a plate, I will just pass it around, that's made out of, if you want to touch it, 100% out of discarded animal blood, and then without any additives. Exactly, then it gets pressed, put in the oven, and then demolded after. And then you have this solid material. And then here, the question is also like what to do with this then, because on the one hand this is like this industrial waste, and maybe it could be a product, but then again, like what I mentioned earlier, that I really do not want to make another thing that is made from an animal, that's based on an animal product. And I also don't really see a difference then to leather, for example. It's just maybe one of the really big difference, and also maybe why this project works so well to tell the story is that somehow it's not really possible to remove the idea of blood from the idea of life and death, because it's so embedded within this material. It symbolizes both, and I think that's really that's really unique. And I think so with this project and with this with like the material in itself, I'm actually more interested in the possibility of a material to be to tell a story rather than to be used in a functional context. Yes.
In that context, when you are not encouraging the industry to produce more blood. It's a side product, it's a waste product of the industry, which you are probably not going to shut down in the near future. But doesn't even if you would see it the way that if your project or your products can go on as long long as this industry continues to go on and you make the best of it as in sourcing the waste, what happens? And I think because I'm seeing this now, you have like liquid blood. My question is actually, I'm a hunter myself. I know what happens with the body,
Yeah.
and I know what happens with the blood. So you kind of can only harvest the blood in a certain molecular state out of the animal. So you kind of have to rely on the industry in order to get your resources.
Yeah.
Get it from me, for example.
Yeah, no, but I think, maybe in a better world, this project wouldn't exist. Yeah. And I think it's really what I want to address also with this project is exactly this disconnection between production and consumption. And I think, it's really to have the objects as conversation pieces, to be aware of the existence of this material, because it's something we don't really want to think about, that the blood exists, also because of all the connotations that are connected to the blood. Because I think through those objects it's pretty clear suddenly that an animal died for the existence of this object. And I think somehow maybe we kind of sometimes lose actually the thing that when we eat meat that you actually relate it to an animal. And I think it's important to see the animal as also what I want to do with this piece, which is a record that is made out of cow blood that plays the heartbeat of a cow. So it's really addressing those maybe this contradiction of blood, that it can actually represent the both. And over there, maybe later we can turn it on also, you can actually also feel the heartbeat of the animal on the bench that you can sit on while you listen to it. And I think listening to somebody's heartbeat is something very intimate, and I feel like that in this animal-human relationship that we have with the animals that we eat, there's no more intimacy at all. So to recreate something like this and to listen to the heartbeat and to become aware of actually the life also and the death of the animal is something that's very important, I think, even if we keep on eating meat. And so overall I think this is, to the overall situation that agricultural production is it became invisible. And I feel like if you want to have an inclusive discussion about the ethics of production and consumption, you actually need to have kind of a common ground of knowledge of what happens. So I think it's actually important to know that there is animal blood which is being mass industrial waste, and this maybe helps to reconsider maybe the consumption habits that we have. And this is a little bit work in progress. So this is another piece where those are tiles that are polished to a point that they become reflective. So it's kind of a mirror, and that's hopefully I have that finished soon. But I think what I also what I like about the material is that we have somehow those very visceral associations when it comes to blood, I think, that are very much fueled also by movies and by just the fact also that it is used to amplify certain situations. So this is a bit a nasty slide, but I use it just to say that any of those images, be it like the fear and the disgust that is shown, or you can also show devotion in a religious context. I think actually blood in every religion has a very strong metaphorical meaning, and also kind of a madness that is here. This is out of a newspaper article that I found of somebody that bathes in pig blood because they believe in the rejuvenating properties of it. And I think what is special about those images actually to see none of this is actually about blood. It's just to amplify a certain situation. So when you want to show something violent, it's going to become more violent when you add blood to it. When you want to show something, when you want to show your devotion, so also when you sacrifice an animal, you need to see the blood running onto the stone. So it always just is used to make a certain situation even more intense. And I feel that by having a material that does not do that, it is actually maybe easier to also invite somebody into a conversation instead of using the shock value that's very inherent in blood. It's good to be very loud for a very short amount of time, but it is not really something I think that helps to really discuss the ethics of eating animals, I think, what is addressed earlier in the project. And well, instead of using this very visceral qualities of blood, this shock value, I'm more interested actually in what it's like the story somehow that can be told through it when you get past that. So this is also now then looping back to working with blood, and also I was always very reluctant to work with human blood because I always thought, yeah, if you want to do something with your blood, you should go donate it. But then actually there are certain people who can't donate their blood because of various reasons. But then I thought that can become like an interesting narrative actually to address issues of stigmatization because of infectious diseases that you might carry in your blood. And this project that I'm going to show you now was commissioned by the Wellcome Collection from 2019, and basically what I did for it is that I collaborated with a peer support group, and I interviewed people that are HIV positive, and I took their blood donations, and then we created those objects that can be held by the visitor while you listen to the personal somebody's story, and it's always individual, and it's very for me it was very, very moving. And I think talking about disease, it's very important not to start seeing people as their medical status, and I also think that statistical data really hides individual tragedy. So I think actually to really listen to somebody, I think is going to help you the most to maybe break with your preconceived notions about what it means of having this disease. And then, well, it was presented together with those interviews, and at a certain point, or actually like right after I conducted the interview, I actually felt that this is much more powerful than any object could be, is what this person is telling me at the moment. So the objects became more a conversation opener to then really engage and to listen to somebody. So then I've been working with a friend of mine to publish all of those interviews that I conducted actually in small booklets. We're still working on that, and then well, all of the proceeds from that would be given to the peer support group that I've been working with for this project. I'll just skip this. And this is the latest project that I would like to tell you about, which actually directly builds on the project with the objects, but it actually removes the object and it looks at blood through a different lens, actually through the lens of a microscope. And it's a film that I worked on together with, again, with Juan Arturo Garcia and with Jennifer Strauchenkamp, who is a microbiologist. And the project was commissioned by the Science Gallery in India. And for this project, I collaborated also with a filmmaker from India that she made a film about HIV in 2005, and she conducted really a lot of interviews. And many of the interviews have never been shown to anyone because they didn't make it into the film. So she had like those archive of untold stories that they basically proposed that we should collaborate on this and make a film with those stories and combine it with images of blood through a microscope. So it's a little bit having this very personal story on the one hand, and then looking at blood with laboratory equipment, so a very medical context, but then also interweaving those two things and creating something that works together, but it's also clashes at moments. And Well, here are some of the images, but also I think to finish, I would like to show you a short part of the film.
Ich muss dir mal was sagen, habe ich gesagt, brauchst du nicht, ist schon klar. Ich habe das auch nicht unbedingt so gesagt, worüber ich mich noch erzählt habe. Ich habe gesagt über Sex, über Sexualverkehr, nicht jetzt über die Blutergeschichte. Das hatte zwei Gründe. Den einen habe ich schon genannt, weil er noch lebte und weil ich wusste, dass es ihm nicht lieb war und wo ich auch denke, jeder trifft seine eigene Entscheidung, wie er damit umgeht. Also was er mir nicht verbieten konnte, ist, dass ich öffentlich mit meiner Infektion werde. Das war ihm auch nicht so recht, aber da treffe ich ja die Entscheidung, wie ich damit umgehe.
I just remember just feeling dirty, feeling horrible, hating myself, hating my mum, because the only way I could have this is through my parents. And I don't know my dad, so it must be through my mum.
Und so war das auch für mich, fühlte ich mich isoliert, auch mal darüber nachzudenken, was tue ich dem Kind eigentlich an. Also das gab es alles bei mir auch. Was tue ich dem Kind an? Und auch tatsächlich diese Gedanken, Mensch, scheiße irgendwie, und wenn die auch positiv ist, und hat sie das verdient.
And my family wanted me to have an abortion because I was so young. But I just couldn't face killing a baby. But then I'm going to kill my baby anyway. So it was really like, I couldn't win. I was like, I'm not killing my baby intentionally, but then I might kill my baby if they get HIV. As time went on, he had all these tests and they were all negative.
ಸಾಯ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ಮಗುಗೆ 6 ತಿಂಗಳು ಮಗು, ಕೊನೆ ಮಗು 6 ತಿಂಗಳು, ವರ್ಷ, 1.5 ವರ್ಷ, ಆ ಥರ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಮಕ್ಕಳು. ಆ ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಏನೇ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಲಿ, ಏನೇ ಆಗಲಿ, ಒಂದು ಭಯ ಒಂದು ಕಡೆ, ಯಾವಾಗ ಏನಾಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನೋ. ನನಗೆ ಇವಾಗಲೇ ನನ್ನ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ನನಗೆ ಯಾರೂ ನೋಡೋರಿಲ್ಲ, ಇನ್ನು ಏನಾಗ್ತೀನೋ, ಹೆಂಗಿರುತ್ತೋ. ಆ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಇದ್ದರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ಒಂದು ಭಯ ನನಗೆ. ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಇದ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೋ ಏನೋ ಅಂತೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಭಯ ನನಗೇನಪ್ಪ ಅಂದರೆ, ಸತ್ತೋಗ್ಬಿಡೋಣ ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಯಾರೂ ನೋಡೋರಿಲ್ಲ. ನಾನು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಆ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಸತ್ತೋಗ್ಬಿಡೋಣ ಅಂತೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ತುಂಬ ಸಾರಿ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೆ. ರಾತ್ರಿ ಮಲಗಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ ಯೋಚನೆ, ಯಾವ ಥರ ಸಾಯಿಸೋದು ಈಸಿನಾ? ಸಾಯಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಆದರೆ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಸಾಯಿಸ್ಬೇಕು, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾವಿ ಇದೆಯಾ ನೋಡೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲ ಏನಾದರೂ ಮದ್ದು ತಂದು ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ನೋಡೋದು, ಮತ್ತು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಸಾಯಿಸೋದು. ಮತ್ತು ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಕೂರಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಊಟ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ಅಯ್ಯೋ ಈ ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಸಾಯಿಸೋದು ನಾನು ಅಂತ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಆ ಥರ ಎಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬ ಒಂದು ಯೋಚನೆ ಆಗ್ತಾಯಿತ್ತು. ಸರಿ.
Ja, das Übliche. Die haben mir alle gesagt, ich muss sterben lernen und haben auch gesagt, und das war eigentlich für meinen weiteren Lebenswerk das vielleicht ein bisschen dramatischere, dass ich eben allerhöchstens noch 1,5 bis 2 Jahre habe.
Okay, so if you want, actually this film is also, if you want to watch the whole film, it's available on the platform of the Science Gallery in India. And I think to close my presentation, I would like to steal a part of one of the interviews I conducted with somebody for this project, with Gary, who said it's talking about difficulties like this that is gonna bring us closer together, and it's the ignorance and the fear that's going to divide us. Thank you.
name is Tim de Loo. This was a very short movie from our project New Blue that I'm doing together with Sandra Nielsen. And now we're going to go to the presentation. I hope it was not too short to present the video, but I will explain much more. So this is New Blue. The subtitle is A New Kind of Blue, where I... Oh, that goes... I have to put on pause. That I started in 2019. And since January, I'm doing this together with Sandra Nielsen. She's a best friend of mine, and at the same time, a techno-anthropologist. And we are doing this project together. Myself, I am Tim de Loo. I am a material and product designer. I call sometimes myself post-consumer material designer. It's sometimes a bit difficult to say, but I basically focus on waste resources and try to transform them into new materials, regenerative materials. And Sandra is coming more from a business anthropology background, looking more into the interaction between environment, action, and human, and how this is all interconnected. I just wanted to quickly first show a project we did before New Blue. It's also very much engaged in the fashion industry, where we did this project last year. And we wanted to kind of investigate, can you justify buying a men's shirt for 40 euros at the H&M? And when you pay this price, did you pay everyone well or not? So we kind of asked ourselves, like, can we kind of replicate this shirt in Berlin, in our local communities? So what we did is we bought this shirt from the H&M, and we completely deconstructed it and made a pattern out of that. And this pattern we then gave to various people through an open call. So we made like a lot of printouts and asked the people around in Berlin, do you want to make a shirt? Each open call had a different, how you say that, like an open call, each open call was different, but there were 3 ones. Because we were looking for specific persons to make this shirt. And the one was a tailor, a very skilled crafts tailor. The second one was a freelance fashion designer or a fashion student. And the third one was an amateur. And in this sense, the amateur, it has a very negative connotation, but I think here the amateur is more like a person that is not educated in this field, but is still having a passion to do it. So this person is having a completely different perspective as someone who is like learned to do this. So we found it was really fun and really crazy because we got a lot of applications from very different people, and it was really difficult to choose. And then because we also had a limited budget, we only had 200 euros per person. We asked each of those persons to recreate this shirt for 200 euros. So is this too much because we bought the shirt for 40 euros, or is this not enough? We really didn't know how to approach this actually. So it became a dialogue with the makers itself. And it was a very, very interesting look into the world of creative people, of creating something. Because if you ask someone to recreate a garment, a fashion designer also wants to put in their identity, their belief in how it should look like. So the shirt didn't become a shirt, but a statement of this designer. And as soon as an individual is trying to put in or reflect their identity onto a garment, you see very fast that the people put more passion into this project. And when you put more passion into a project, mostly you tend to neglect the hours you have to spend on it and the money is spent on it, and you kind of go over it. So there we kind of see like a very interesting thing happening where labor and money and value and kind of delivering something became something really interesting where people worked way much more than they actually got. So this was Melis, and she's a freelance fashion designer. She studied at HTW here in Berlin, and and she made this shirt in the middle, and she kind of said like that she really liked the assignment, and she was really inspired to make something really fast under 200 euros, like to kind of skip a lot of things you have to do. So like the buttons is very labor intensive, or the color is really difficult to get in. But then in the end she said like, yeah, I actually spent double the amount of time in it, so actually I should ask you for 400 euros instead of 200 euros. And so we got this really interesting play happening over here, because we also asked someone else, and she was more like an amateur, so she never did it before. And she said like, I cannot really accept this 200 euros because I'm not a professional. So there was this really, well, sometimes also kind of a conflict over there. And was also, we also didn't know how to approach this, because we also both are freelancers in that sense. So we said like, okay, 200 euros for a shirt is, it's quite some money, quite nice money to get if you make it fast. And we showed this project and the whole process basically in Veldfumf. Unfortunately, it was planned for an exhibition with like videos and whole installation, but because of Corona, we just showed it in the window. So it became kind of a window display with shirts, which was also very interesting, because then it suddenly was kind of looking as if it was in a shop. So it became a boutique. And it was a very interesting approach. And we really liked this project because it was very anthropological and looking into how do people think, work, and interact with materials, with humans, and a kind of the reflection of each individual in one of the shirts. You can really see in that. So this is like also a small statement of, like the girl here over here, Melis. So this is also very much about interaction between the assignment and like the person making her. So, she gave a bit of a discount because it was a nice conversation and, like social interaction. And she said like, okay, you're like two small designers, so I will give a discount or make this bar smaller instead if I would work for Coca-Cola. So it's a lot of like negotiation, but was actually not, it kind of destroyed the integrity of the whole project, but also was adding to it. And in general, or like in overall of this project, it was really good to look kind of behind the garment. So look at the story behind how the garment is made. So this is the first picture of New Blue. I started this in 2018-19-ish. It started with a jeans I got, and this jeans was from COS, and I only had it 2 months, and it completely ripped out. It was 100% cotton. And the thing was that I was really frustrated and annoyed by it, that it was like already getting teared down so fast in just 2 months, and I was really disappointed because it was quite expensive. So I decided to completely destroy it and actually look at what is in a jeans, 100% cotton jeans. And within that jeans, I completely, very neatly deconstructed it so that I had all the seams and the hems and the waistlines and everything out of that, and kind of like looking at what's in there. And I discovered a lot of plastic, metal, PU foam and everything that was actually in the jeans, and that's kind of triggered me to go on with this material. And I completely ripped the whole jeans in pieces and the idea was to sew it together again, all the small pieces, and then make a new garment out of it. And this is kind of like how I started New Blue. Simultaneously, I was working at Textielhaven, And this was a new project at that time where donated clothes from Berlin were selected and given to the homeless of Berlin. And I started this, I was one of the starting people over there. We kind of wanted to make a transparent sorting system where the people of Berlin could come around and see actually all the donations that come in and go out. And I look very happy here, but it's actually a very sad story. This was around Christmas, and there was it's a huge factory hall close to Storkower Straße. And a lot of people before Christmas start like to donate their clothes to the homeless of Berlin. But the problem is that everything that was donated was summer clothes, because people thought, okay, now I'm getting ready for winter, all the summer clothes have to go away. So most of this, actually what is laying over there, was going to be thrown away because it was not suitable for the season at that time. And working over there, it was a really interesting experience, because you learn really about it's a very small community, Berlin, if you look worldwide, what they are donating and what is actually going to the people in need, in this case, the homeless. Unfortunately, only 15% at that time could be given to the homeless, and the rest had to be thrown away. It was also not possible to store it, because every week around 40 tons of donations came in, so it was a constant process of taking out and throwing away. And it's very complicated to say, like, hey, but why does this work? Yeah, like a lot of people are donating clothing and stuff like that, and why can I not just wear that? It's also because a lot of the clothing that is donated is, what I said, the wrong season, but also it's very much stained, or it is incredibly cheap made before. And then talking about like Primark and H&M, this is in a way designed that you can only wear it one time, and then if you kind of hand it over again to a charity, most of the time the quality is it's such low quality that it's not useful for more to give further. And you think like, yeah, but why not? It's like an H&M shirt, and if it's okay, it's okay. It's like, yes, that's true. But there's also kind of a story about that the homeless people also need to look good and feel well and fine in what they are wearing. So you cannot really give them a ripped down t-shirt or like a ripped down pants, because they also want to feel like they just belong in society and can walk around like everybody else. So there's we got a lot of interesting conversations and interaction and discussions with a lot of people over there. And what actually slowly happened is that the waste was reduced and the value of the donations went up. So people knew exactly what to donate, like sleeping bags, tents, shampoo and deodorant, and like things that are kind of necessary and needed to survive on the streets here in Berlin. And that was a very interesting thing to see, that people kind of learn by like donating in a way that it has a bigger social impact. Then again, there was also a lot of things. You have to also think about that people want to get rid of their clothes, but there's not really an infrastructure for it. And a lot of horrible materials also keep left over there. And it's not a horrible material, but at one point, what a lot was donated was like ripped open jeans or like torn down jeans, and it was such a huge pile of that I kind of decided to work with that as my material for New Blue. And this is a picture of how I hand cut the whole jeans in parts and shredded it into small pieces till it becomes a fiber again that looks like a raw material of cotton but then blue. And this was the first sample, so I just really naively sewed it together with my sewing machine, And then I was like, okay, this could be something. And then I was like, how can I like kind of scale this or make this more easy instead of like cutting 1 centimeter or 1 centimeter squares from one genes. And so I kind of researched into how to scale this up. I went to a research institute in Chemnitz, and there I came with a suitcase of 80 genes, and then I asked them to shredder it, and they were like, what are you going to do with 80 genes that are shredded? And it's like, I don't know yet. And I really didn't know what to do at that point yet, but I was like, I'm going to sew them together at one way. And then I figured out that with these fibers, I could use the same technique of making paper. So you have this water basin, where it's like floating fibers in it, and then you have this kind of like mesh frame where you can lift out the fibers, and you press that again with like 2 ton or 5 ton, and then it's kind of a thick fleece. This fleece is still very unstable, so what I did is used embroidery, digital aided embroidery, to kind of reinforce the textile. And what came out of that is then a series of samples with different kinds of fibers, colors, different patterns, very figurative, like a smiley over here, to show kind of the potential of the embroidery and the fibers. So here it's a bit more like clear. We really like to work in between the field of craft and industry. So look at how can we create something truly unique and monitor everything what's happening, and also at the same time look at an industry where it could be scaled. So the left one is recycled fleece made out of industrially recycled fibers. And the right one is fleece made with this same paper technique with white and blue genes. And then you can create this kind of like pattern. And this is now called the cowboy pattern in our archive. What then happens is it will be embroidered. Here's a simple shape of a square, but we can manufacture it completely that it's zero waste. So we can embroider the whole cut pattern of the genes on this, meaning that all the fibers that are not stitched, they can be dissolved in water again and reused. This is our circular system of how it could potentially work out. So a lot of genes, waste genes, will be shredded into pieces. This is called mechanical recycling. And this is then transformed into a fleece that is then zero waste embroidered. That's over here. And when you dip this into water, this kind of fleece that's not stitched will dissolve. You can gain this again out of the water. And at the same time, take a step out of the manufacturing line. So you don't have to cut the pattern out anymore. It's already finished. Then it will be sewn together, and hopefully at one point it will be sold. At the moment it's still prototype phase, so it's not there yet. And at the moment we are doing a lot of life cycle assessments with different research institutes, looking at the materials life cycle, looking into the friction of it, the pollution of water, the energy usage. And so we still have to do a lot of work to close the loop, so to say, and make it a product that also can be recycled again. And this is kind of the current state of it. We've created this nice photo shoot. You can also see over here. It's done by Paul Banning, a friend of mine from Holland, a very nice fashion photographer. And last year I won the German Federal Award for Eco-Design Young Talent, which is really cool. And our current development is that we make fabric by the roll. So instead of like completely zero waste, we are looking into making meter wear and try to sell it, hopefully in the future, to businesses and labels, fashion brands. That's it.